Thank you, my brothers. Brother Secretary, I'll throw the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Worshipful Master. Richard Porter, Orion 51 and Penticton 147. Very pleased to have Right Worshipful Brother Trevor McKeown with us tonight, but we're going to kick off with our very own Brother Junior Warden, who's put together a package. We're going to play a video that takes a little while, set the music that shows all of our ghosts on the wall, what we call them, but our past masters. So we digitize that in preparation of preparing a work for our 125th anniversary. So we'll be able to revise our 100-year book and turn it into 125. So we're going to play a video. We're going to introduce Ron Crawford first, let him have some words and a bit of an introduction, and he'll tell me to play the video, and hopefully it'll be in focus. Thank you.
Before we play the video, I have just a few words. It is with gratitude that I recognize the work of the brethren that produced the 75th and 100th anniversary booklets to celebrate our lodge. I'm also thankful to the brethren that took the time to photograph, frame, and mount the past worshipful masters and Grand Lodge officers of Orion 51 on what is now formally called the Wall of Ghosts. The digital files of the past masters, taken by others and myself, have been cropped, sharpened, and enhanced to the best of my ability with the technology in my hand in 2024. The purpose of this book is to put recorded history of Orion 51 for the first 100 years and align that writing with the worshipful masters that served our lodge. It is both digital and printable version that can be enjoyed by young members, old members, and future members alike. My hobby is genealogy. I enjoy researching and recording where and how my elders affected and influenced not only my family, but the nations of Canada and the nations that they came from. I enjoy doing that research, and then I write about those historical things that they had accomplished in their life. And it's just something I really enjoy doing. And my family and I are extremely grateful for the sacrifices they made and the seeds they have planted to give me and my family what we have today. Finally, from Romans 12:6, writings on talents and teaching. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy, according to the proportion of faith, or ministry, let us wait on ministry, or he that teaches on teaching, he that ruleth with diligence, he that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. Thank you. Worshipful Master. I present you first copy of the book for our lodge.
Thank you.
And it's to be enjoyed by one and all. And
the history. I grew up in this town a long, long time ago. Thank you very, very much.
Tell the fire engine story.
Beg your pardon?
The fire engine story.
Never mind that story. Thank you very much.
Play the video.
I have to share just briefly. We went and had lunch down by Skaha Lake at a new pub, and Bill's telling me, oh, there used to be a house here. And when he was a kid, he lived up on Government Street. And the house burned down. So he was out along Government Street, could see the smoke way down by Skaha, but he knew the fire engine would be coming by. So he was there to watch the fire engine go by. Well, the thing stopped. The fireman said, you want to come? Up on the truck and down to the fire. Hours later, his dad's looking for him. He sees the smoke figures that's where you'd find them. Can you imagine that today? Okay, we're gonna play a video. If you want to get donut or coffee or get up and just kind of stretch while it's playing, that's fine. But I think you're gonna enjoy seeing all the pictures up on the screen as we go with their dress and their mannerisms. And the gavel, we should get the gavel out and show everybody, but we have a gavel that was a prune cutting from a tree planted when our Grand Lodge formed. And most of them will be holding that gavel. So here we go. I can't get that off of the screen. I'm trying to get rid of that setup. I don't know. I had an update and now I've got artificial intelligence trying to help me. One thing we like to do in Orion Lodge is we'll get Harry Shaw. We've had Bill Batten and some others that are longtime members get up and just start pointing out the pictures and start telling stories about our past masters. There's Dad. Harry's other dad. And Phil Weissman, who was just up, would be turning over in his grave if he knew that the chairs weren't alternating blue and red. Yeah. There's Harry. I got in trouble with him when he sat next to me when I was junior warden on the Grand Master's official visit. He was Air Force, I was Navy, and we were going at each other. Doug Collins' father. Here you are, Bill. A lot of people.
Thank you. So as you can see that how much I enjoy history and learning about this lodge. Just one more quick presentation I'd like to make. I'm hoping to how to address you, so.
Trevor works.
I appreciate, we appreciate, Orion appreciates you coming and doing this presentation today. Means a lot to me and to us. I present you.
Well, much appreciated. We'll want you to autograph it.
It's your initial one, your autograph.
That is my answer.
Oh, all right. All right. Well, thank you very much. This will be going, of course, into the library in Vancouver. I would suggest that you might want to consider presenting a copy to the library in Kamloops, which is an extensive library. The more places we can get these things out, the better chance that history will remember them. Because if you have them, and you only have them here, well, a century from now, no one will know about it.
Well, it would be my pleasure to carry it. I firmly believe that this history needs to be preserved going forward. So again, it's for young, old, and new alike to enjoy this.
Yeah, no, this is great. This will be going into our collection. I thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any questions or anything?
You have some other projects on the go, Brother Junior Warden, that we could talk about, but you did a survey and you've got some results from that survey, but you're looking ahead to our education program. I think we've got a pretty good one.
Yeah, I conducted a survey with the help of Brother Ryan Roybal. And I must thank Brother Ryan Roybal and Brother Troy Thacker in helping us with the meal today and helping get the building organized so we can put on this event. And for those that don't know, there's a red bucket that's full of some soft drinks and water. Just go out and help yourself. Anyways, with the survey that I've done, it's given us some good insight into where we want to go with as far as education goes. And there's a lot of interest in philosophy of Freemasonry, lodge traditions, performance of ritual and floor work, how to maintain degree practices going forward, and the importance of going through chairs and things like that. It's my thing is if I move forward going into worshipful master, I feel I need to know what the needs and wants of the lodge are so that we can work towards that future. And I also believe that that's real necessary tools going forward for long-term planning. And right now we're getting a focus going forward on short and long-term education needs and trying to fulfill the needs for the new Master Masons on the horizon, of which I call myself the first Master Mason of the new ones in Orion Lodge. I was the last Master Mason to prove up seconds before we went dark for the 2 years of COVID. And I thank you so much for this opportunity. It's very much appreciated.
I'm just trying to get the screen. Good. I think we're going to be okay. Thank you, Ron, for that. All right. We're indeed very fortunate to have Right Worshipful Brother Trevor McKeown with us today. I gave him a call some time ago and asked, and he didn't hesitate. He just checked his calendar and said he would be here. I thank him personally for that. What is Masonic education? The history, evolution, and importance of the Quatuor Coronati Lodge number 2076 in England. A grand historian, Trevor M. McKeown, Master Designate of Quatuor Coronati Lodge number 2076. Over the past 30 years, Right Worshipful Brother McKeown has edited the Grand Lodge Masonic Bulletin, created and maintained the Grand Lodge website, served as chairman of the Vancouver Masonic Day Committee, edited and designed several Masonic books and videos, and has traveled across British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon, lecturing on the history of California too, maybe that was Zoom, I'm not sure.
No, I haven't been in California for a long time.
I watched your Zoom presentation through Grand Lodge.
Oh, okay, no, I wasn't in there. Okay. Remember that.
He has been curator of Vancouver Masonic Library and Museum since 1996. He's currently on the editorial board of Ars Quatuor Coronati and is expected to be installed as master of the world's premier lodge of Masonic research. I tried to keep it modest. I could keep going on, Trevor, but I think we all want to hear what you have to say. So thank you very much. And
well, thank you very much for that introduction, I think. Now, actually, well, now you put my presentation up through your computer.
on the screen.
I was going to run it through mine.
Well, why don't you?
If I can, we'll see if we can sort out this bit of technology. And while I'm, oh, well, we're on wheels.
You could do that through the projector for everyone here, but I'm doing this for Zoom recording, so.
It's just I don't believe that you will have the same typefaces that I do. And maybe this is the port that I'm supposed to put this into. We'll find out.
And then unplug the other one, perhaps?
This one?
Yes. There we go.
Signal.
You have to choose the source.
Well, I need an IT specialist to explain to me what.
We have one. We have one.
Oh, glad to-
Very worshipful brother Stephen Chung from up in Kelowna has come down.
So before I get whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing, excellent bit of work. Appreciate that. And yeah, this is your history. This is generally because, of course, I one or two faces up there. As a rule, when I'm looking at photographs like this, either on the wall or in a presentation, I'm not so much looking at the people because I don't know them, as I'm looking at their regalia and their general deportment, the clothes they're wearing, because I find that aspect of our history fascinating. I note in the early ones, and this is not just your lodge, jewel is born on the lapel, not over the pocket. Few, if any, of those photographs had a name badge. Name badges were not a thing in this jurisdiction, probably until the 60s or 70s. To this day, it's not a thing in England. They actually find it kind of amusing when we turn up wearing name badges. I see some of the aprons, not consistently, for having a fringe. Some lodges give their past master an apron with a fringe, and that's the standard, but here you sort of fluctuate, you alternate between that. Other differences that I noticed, you went through, so you started wearing the apron under the coat, and then there was a period of time when you're wearing them over top, and then you went back to wearing them under, and I don't know what your current practice is. What are you doing now?
Over the coat, unless if it's a funeral, no. But
I remember when I joined Freemasonry in 1980, I was told by someone who I assumed knew what he was talking about, but didn't once I started doing my research, is that Canadian lodges wore it over top and ancient lodges wore it underneath. That was the practice in my district, and that the fellow who told me that assumed that that was what was universal. The first thing you learn about Freemasonry once you start traveling is that there are no real standards. It varies everywhere. So there is no right way. There's the right way your lodge does it. And that includes, of course, the signs and everything you do, but also the way you dress it. And all of that is, do not be embarrassed that you're in a room in some strange lodge, and what you automatically do is different from what they're doing, and none of them should ever criticize you for that. That's what you were taught to do. So that was an excellent, literally, snapshots of your history. So what am I here to talk about today? Let's see. I am the grand historian. Why am I the grand historian? I am not entirely sure. So I am here to talk about Quatuor Coronati Lodge number 2076. And to talk about Quatuor Coronati Lodge, We'll talk about its members and what its members has done, the reason why it was formed, the reason why it picked the name that it did, and what it's been doing over its history. It meets in Great Queen Street, middle of London. This building was built on the corner in 1928. It's called a peace monument. It was started right after the war in 19. They didn't get it finished until 2018. And rather than calling it the Grand Lodge building or a Masonic temple, they called it a peace monument. I don't know this for a fact. I suspect it was a tax dodge. I don't know. You know why. Although there are some large plaques in there listing, of course, the fallen in the First World War, in the Second. This is the main entrance to the main temple in the front. They only open those doors for the quarterly communications. The Grand Master has his own entrance down the end of that street there, and the actual entrance to the building is about there. Across the street, there used to be 3 or 4 Masonic regalia stores. All of them have gone out of business or gone online. That's neither here nor there. But so Lodge has met at Great Queen Street since it was founded in 1884. It originally actually met in the Keynote Rooms. Now you can't really see it, but the Keynote Rooms is a hotel at the far end of Grand Lodge, which was originally the Grand Lodge building. And in fact, there's still a connecting passage between our building and the Keynote Rooms, which is a hotel banquet facility. And occasionally we will have banquets in there, and a couple of our lodge rooms are still used as smaller banquet rooms in there with the not Masonic decor, but the actual, you know, the pillars and what have you are all still there. There are not sure how many lodges in the building. 26. No 2 of them are identical. This is the room I think the Q.C. meets in, although I think it's still yellow, but I think they put some posters up on the wall or something. I can't see it from this angle because we're looking towards the east, but they very few, if any, of those lodges actually have pillars in the rooms. So that's not an important part of it. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. This will be digressions on digressions on digressions. So trying to not lose the flow here too much. So the lodge, Quatuor Coronati, where did that name come from? What does it mean? Source of the lodge's name, 2 legends about Christian martyrs. First legend talks about 4 Roman soldiers who refused to let me catch up here. Who refused to sacrifice someone called East Coast. I'm not sure how that was pronounced. I've never been able to pronounce that properly. Asclepius. And so they refused to make sacrifice to him or pay obeisance or whatever, and were martyred, killed by order of the Emperor Diocletian at the time. We're talking here around 300. So their story became conflated with another story about a group of 5 stonemasons. Now they have a connection to masonry. And there was 5 stone. This is again a story, a legend. Who knows if it's really true or not? But they also were Christians, and they refused to carve a statue either for this same god or for some other one, and were suitably martyred after that as well. So stone carving martyrs were an obvious choice for patron saints of Freemasonry. Now in the ancient work, as you know, patron saints of Freemasonry are considered to be the 2 holy St. Johns. That was not the case for stonemasons. In Scotland, it's St. Andrew, and in most of Freemasonry at the time, for stonemasons, it was the 4 crown martyrs. Were their patron saints. So the founding members of Q.C. created what they believed to be a new school of Masonic research. They didn't all speak with one voice. They didn't all agree in what they wanted to do. But the lodge first met in 1886, and
it included in its mandate a requirement to publish every year all papers that were presented in the lodge. So their goal was not simply to do serious research into the history of Freemasonry, but to publish it and to communicate that to as large an audience as they could. Ours, Quatuor Coronati, and we have, I don't know what you've got in Kamloops, but in Vancouver we have almost 2 complete sets from 1887 to the present. So here, in this publication, the members of the lodge, the authors of many papers on our history, papers, essays, monographs, discussed what they discovered in their researches. They debated, they disagreed. It was a dialogue. To understand the lodge, let's introduce you to a few of its early members. They created what they called the authentic school of Masonic research, because prior to this, we had a tendency to assume that our ritual was actual history. So we figured that Freemasons wearing our little satin aprons and collars actually were carving stone and buildings in Solomon's temple. There were many Masons who actually believed that lineal connection. To this day, and maybe in this room, there were some brothers who feel there's somehow a link between us and the Knights Templar. That's been thoroughly debunked, but there's still pop history books published to that effect. So the point of the authentic school of Masonic research was to go back into all the documents, all the minutes, books, all the written records, anything that you could possibly find, and if you could not find something that actually demonstrated that there was a documented connection, that became a legend, that became a pretty story, that was not part of our history. So the first 20, 30 years of QC really went through all of our early history and did an excellent job of researching and documenting what the real history was. Our first master was a fellow named Charles Warren, wearing many jewels. He was chief constable for the London Metropolitan Police Force during the Jack the Ripper murders, the Whitechapel murders. Reason why, although the lodge, I think, didn't get warranted for a couple of years after they'd actually gotten their dispensation, was because he was, Warren was out of the country. He was in Palestine. He was in Palestine doing archaeological research. So he was a soldier and explorer. His only contribution, actually, his only published work for AQC, for Quatuor Coronati, was an article he wrote, a paper he wrote on his explorations, his archaeological dig in Palestine. The lodge's immediate past master, honorary, of course, was the Reverend Woodford. And he wrote a lot of papers. At that time in England, there were a lot of, every district or every province had its own Masonic publication. There were a number of other gentlemen's quarterlies and what have you publishing Masonic work. And he did a lot of other publishing at the time. And he was perhaps the earliest proponent of the authentic school. He said, if I can't find it documentation, then it's just a fable. He often wrote under the nom de plume, the pen name of Masonic student, which I really appreciate. He never claimed to be an authority, and neither do I. Although I'm told that often enough. He also did a lot of collaborations, and as an author, it's difficult to collaborate with other writers and different styles, different agendas, different ideas, but they're Masons and they got along quite well. McKeown was the one who named the lodge. Woodford edited Kenning's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, which is an excellent historical encyclopedia, not that accurate. He was also an early proponent of the Ordo Templi Orientis. Picture of you in here. Although going back to the Ordo Templi Orientis, it's interesting that although Quatuor Coronati Lodge was promoting the authentic school, it was very much feet on the ground, head out of the clouds, research about Freemasonry. In the early books and the early publications, they also published a lot of articles by what later was termed fringe Freemasons. Fringe Freemasonry was not an influential group at the time, more influential today perhaps, but a group of Freemasons whose interest in Freemasonry was mostly, I suspect, motivated by their interest in esoteric topics. We might even say the occult. So you have people like John Yarker, who was one of the early proponents of something called the ancient primitive rite of Memphis Mizraim, which lost the battle with the Scottish Rite to be a concordant body in Freemasonry, because Albert Pike knocked on every door in every state and convinced them of that. But he was, some of these people, oh well, Westcott, founder of the Ordo Templi Orientis, so which still exists today as a, and they are unashamedly, unabashedly occult. And their early system of initiation was based very much on Freemasonry. They fairly quickly, though, stepped away from Freemasonry, but at the time and to this day in England, they are considered to be a form of clandestine Freemasonry. In North America, they're just some esoteric club and has nothing to do with Freemasonry, so we don't care. And in fact, in this jurisdiction, we have a fair number of members that belong to both Freemasonry and various occult circles, if you would have the Ordo Templi Orientis, Golden Dawn, if that rings a bell for anyone. Who else have I got in here? Yeah, Westcott. Westcott was the medical, the coroner for Metropolitan London, large area in London. Woodford and Westcott both contribute a lot of pages to AQC, talking about Kabbalah, talking about Hermeticism, the Rosicrucians, stuff that would normally not be talked about in the launch, but they were doing their own researches on that, and AQC was prepared to publish it. Key part of the publication, though, is that someone would write a paper, properly footnoted, properly documented, and then the three principal officers were obligated to write not necessarily a rebuttal or critique, but certainly a response. And several of the other founding members, Ryland and Speth come to mind, would politely disagree with the esoterics because they were much more meat and potato kind of researchers. But that give and take, that dialogue was an important part of what AQC and Quatuor Coronati was doing. The lodge's secretary, as I said, was a fellow named Speth. This photograph is interesting. Not sure if you can see the detail, but he's wearing jewels. This contraption here is called a hanger, and it's got a belt that runs around the collar and comes down, and you would put it into a button here. And you could put all your jewels on this hanger and not leave any holes in your suit. I thought they were excellent contraptions, especially at a time when people wore a lot of jewels. So he's wearing his Royal Arch jewel. That'll be his Quatuor Coronati jewel. Not sure if that's a past master's jewel or not. That may have been a charity jewel. The English are really big on what they call the charity festivals. Every district or every province has this. Grand Lodge, I believe, holds one where they shake down the membership for charity. And if you donate 50 quid to the annual fundraising, you get to wear a jewel for the year. So by the time you pass and your estate has to go clean up all your stuff, you'll have a box full of jewels that you were only allowed to wear for 1 year. I think it varies. So showed you that Great Quincy building. There was a fundraiser, and it was called the Hallstone Jewel. So if you donated £50 to the building of Great Queen Street, you got a permanent jewel, I think, If your lodge donated £1,000 or something like that, then the master got a jewel, which he would then hand to his successor. And you now still have lodges in England where the master is wearing a Hallstone jewel because their lodge contributed a chunk of money to them. So it's one way of recognizing that stuff. So Speth was the first lodge secretary, and he was secretary until the day he died, practically. He wrote something in probably every volume of Q.C. until he passed, and did an awful lot of research of great value. The lodge's first treasurer, I'm not sure if I got his picture here or not. I don't think, didn't write anything for Q.C. He was asked to belong because he was a fiction writer. He was at the time a very popular writer. His name. Oh, well, I'm sorry. Let me roll. My script obviously does not line up with the text of this here. I want to do a quick digression because it was Speth who really organized the correspondence circle. I mentioned earlier that they publish a book every year. Well, you've got to have a market for that book. The membership of Quatuor Coronati Lodge is fixed at 40. I don't think they've ever had a full 40. I think we have 32 members. It's by invitation only. For the most part, it's either academics or published authors, and for some reason, me, is neither. Created the correspondence circle, and any one of you can join the QCCC through their website. There it is. Can't remember what the price is, £40 maybe, and you get a hardcover copy of all the papers. So the lodge meets 4 times a year, and it fits for the installation. So there are 4 papers presented, plus the master's installation address, and plus any other papers that have been submitted to the lodge simply for publication. So it's usually a book of about 160 pages or so. The latest researches. And we often go back and revise our history. That in the first few, it's interesting, in the first few issues of AQC, there was quite an argument about the 1717 date of Grand Lodge of England's founding. And we've always sort of, that was an article of faith. 1717, June 22nd, that was the first meeting. Except that there's only one documented source for that date, and that's the Reverend James Anderson's Constitutions, published in 1723, 6 years later, in which he obviously had an agenda to try and push the date back to include certain people. But really, we can only prove the lodge goes back to 1720. So there was a bit of a in-house discussion about that during the founding of QC. Well, just within the last couple of years, especially in 2017, and England is celebrating its tercentenary, some members of QC decided it was time to revise that, or to revive that controversy. And they had a conference in Cambridge, I think, which I did not attend, in which they agreed to disagree. So the question, we still don't, we'll use 1717. It's easy to remember, but it may not have been quite that. Someone else who was in the Palestine exploration project with Warren was Orion Island. He wrote for the transactions a lot, and he assisted Fred Gould with his the history. And I don't know if you've got a copy in your library. There are 2 pretty much seminal encyclopedias of Freemasonry, histories of Freemasonry. Is Robert Pratt Gould in England, and Albert Galatian Mackey in the States. Mackey's extensive history mostly deals with state by state history for most of his volumes, and quite frankly, I can't really recommend more than the first volume of that. Gould's covers a much broader base and I believe is better written. So both of them wrote histories, both of them wrote encyclopedias. Mackey's encyclopedia, I'm sure, is 3-volume. I'm sure you've got it on your shelf out there. It is a product of its time and place, but is still very much considered a seminal and authoritative work. So recommended for checking bits of our history out. So Harry Ryland, his older brother, was also a member of the lodge, but contributed nothing to the history. That's the you can find that. You get your. Now, I don't know about in this jurisdiction. That's interesting. I'm not sure if you are a member of Q.C. CC. You're entitled to this jewel, but I'm not sure if this jurisdiction permits you to wear it. We'll have to talk to Michael Fox. Never mind. Sir Walter Besant, getting back to my script, was the first founding treasurer. Wrote nothing for the proceedings for AQC, and is really only noteworthy for those of you who know much about other esoteric bodies. He was married briefly to Annie Besant. Annie Besant was one of the founders of the Theosophical Society with Madame Blavatsky in the 1880s. She was a bit of a free thinker, and obviously that marriage didn't last. But Robert Freckbull had a long and extensive writing history for Masonic publications. Say founder of or author of both a history and there's the 3-volume history. That thing got reprinted. Those 3 volumes got reprinted, I think, in a 5 or 6 volume edition, which is the more common one around here. And then, because he'd written it in England, copyright law was a little iffy at the time. It got widely republished across North America. And he didn't see a penny from any of that, but many different editions of it, turns out. Whitaker is an interesting character. He came from Englishman. I'm not sure if he was born in India, but certainly spent most of his life there. Made a good, made a fortune, and spent the rest of his life doing Masonic research. And he found an old document called the Regius Poem, which is the oldest extant Masonic, we call it Masonic document. It is a poem of morals and guidance to stonemasons, first written manuscript, sometime in the 1390s, 1400s, somewhere in there. So we sort of claim that as a Masonic document. It's certainly where we go to for a lot of our ideas. It talks about the 2 pillars. It talks about the 7 liberal arts and sciences. It ends with the line of so mote be, which has become a standard usage, of course. And it talks about the value of charity. So there's a lot of expressions and a lot of information found in the Regius Poem. It's called the Regius Poem because it was found by a fellow named Hollywell in the British Museum, misfiled under some other category. He wrote it, read through it, and said, hold on, this is something else. Wimper, though, took the original's pages, both these sides. So he did a facsimile edition of it in the late 1800s, where he custom made, or he had made, lead type to match all of the curious, odd characters that was in the original. We have we have a copy of that, 1878 or something, in the Vancouver Library as well. John Yarker, I mentioned, those jewels will not be Masonic. Those will belong to various concordant bodies and I don't know if we'll call them clandestine, but certainly irregular, not recognized bodies, because let's say he was a great promoter of various rituals. He got, I'm not going to say blamed, but many people considered him to be a charlatan and a degree monger and just someone that had not worthy of respect or regard. Historians have revisited him, and he wasn't so much a charlatan as he was gullible. Literally, if you were a sea captain, fresh into London and off the boat, and you came and knocked on his door and said, I was in the back of beyond somewhere in darkest wherever, and I was handed this ritual by some tribe or whatever, he would believe that it was real, and he would somehow incorporate it into his own system. As I said, just simply gullibility on his part. But to this day, within certain esoteric orders, the Order of the Orientalists, the Golden Dawn, and others, ancient and primitive rite of Memphis and Mizraim, and its various incarnations, he's held in fairly high regard. He published a magazine called the Neph. The Neph, N-E-N-P-H, is the celestial egg of creation. And of course, the all-seeing eye and the triangle above that. Now, of course, I've completely lost where I was in my script, and it doesn't really matter a whole lot when I'm just rambling aimlessly. Anyway, we talked about Hewin. Yeah, no, but Yarker was not a member of, he published, I don't know, 14 papers, did I say here? Something like that. 26 short papers and notes in AQC. Even though by this point in his career, he had stepped away from Freemasonry entirely. He was spending all of his time with these other bodies, yet as an admitted member, he was in good standing, so QC was more than happy to review his papers and allow them to be published. His grasp of history was a little weak, but he was exploring some other ideas. And as I say, often in the critiques after his papers, people would take him to task for that, but they continue to publish his work, which I think is important because, you know, intellectual honesty requires us, if we're going to be honest about it and, you know, academic about it, we have to give other views the opportunity to be heard and then blast it. But we at least have to give them a forum before, you know, we cannot shut them down sight unseen, my opinion. We had that, I was talking about the Neph a moment ago. Our library in Vancouver also has a complete set of the Neph, which I'm told is fairly rare. And it's interesting when you have old books and people say, well, how much is that worth? There's no way of knowing the value of a book until it goes to auction. And I'm not putting mine up for auction. So all you can do is check the last time it turned up in an auction sale and try and figure out what it was worth. The same with, we have, so 1723, the Reverend James Anderson published his book, The Constitution. This is the frontispiece to it. We have no idea, and I and others have tried to dig into the record. There's actually no record of how many copies of this thing were printed. Probably only about 300. That was the normal press run in 1717, or 1723, early 1700s. And he printed it privately as a fundraiser for himself. He claimed to have the authority of Grand Lodge to write it. Not so much. I mean, they needed a book, so they let him do it. And a couple of interesting things about it. So there's, as I said, maybe 300 printed. For a while, I thought that there may have been a second printing from the same plates, but I've decided that's not the case. Of those 300, I'm now part of an international team that's trying to locate every extant copy, and we're up to about 90 of them now around the world. The problem is any number of them are most likely in private hands, and there's no way of knowing until they turn up at auction. We have two of the original editions in the library in Vancouver. Again, absolutely no idea what they might be worth. We want to think about it. This is the frontispiece illustration with an interesting era. So it's the constitutions being handed from the first Grand Master Payne to the second or third Grand Master, a fellow named Wharton, who then went off and started an irregular body in France or something.
But here we have Euclid's 47th proposition. And the Greek below that says Eureka. And it was not, of course, Pythagoras who said Eureka, but please tell me, I can't remember. Euclid? Well, no, it wasn't, no,
Wasn't there? No, sorry, Archimedes.
thank you, yes, bathtub, right? Water level, Eureka, yes. Archimedes, glad somebody remembered. So whether that was intentional, and there's an interesting group of people, and there may be some of you here, who use such expressions as hidden in plain view, which is sort of an archetype or foundational to a lot of esoteric oracle and a claim made against Freemasonry again is that we're hiding something sinister in plain view. So I look at this, and with my background in publishing, I figure it's just a typographical error. It's, it's an error by the author who didn't think about it. Others claim that this is some sort of secret key that means something. I don't know. Do your own research. If you get interested in our history and in our philosophy, symbolism, there are a field of rabbit holes that you can fall down and never come up from. Be careful. So it can be fascinating, but it can also be very distracting. You always have to keep in mind that all of this is opinion. Don't argue it too strongly. So Yarker, publisher of the Net, put a whole lot of papers in here. And talk about 1717 date being one of our first arguments. There's any number of books that early members of the lodge published that are still in print. Henry Sadler, died in 11, wrote something, Masonic Facts and Fiction, which was, again, an early salvo in that babble about the authentic school. Still a valid read, it's still published. I think Lewis Masonic still has it on there. It's interesting, Gould promoted a major misunderstanding about English Freemasonry's history. Many of you will be aware, so 1717, 1720, the founding of the Grand Lodge of England, what later is now termed the Premier Grand Lodge. Somewhere around 1750, another Grand Lodge was started, and they called themselves the Ancient Grand Lodge, and they labeled the older Grand Lodge the Moderns. The reason they did that was because basically it had less to do with moderns and ancients than it had to do with English and Irish. Now my name is McKeown, so I'm Irish, so you know which side I'm on here. The argument was, so what happened is a whole lot of Irish workers turned up in England in the mid-1700s in the London area, and they want to attend lodge. And the English don't want the Irish coming into their lodges, so they took the passwords of the first and second degrees and reversed them. Reversed the passwords, they reversed it. So that's an innovation in the body of the work, as we call it. So these Irish Masons said, well, we're already Masons in Ireland, we'll just start up our own Grand Lodge, and because we're continuing to use the ancient rituals, we're not making changes, we're going to call ourselves the Ancients and the other group, the Moderns. Gould did not view this as two separate streams of Freemasonry, and there are still many books out there that will claim that this was a schism in Freemasonry. This was some sort of break in Freemasonry in England. It was not. It was two entirely different streams of Freemasonry. And to this day, there is a body of Freemasons in Bristol practicing what they call the Bristol work, one of the more unique rituals in England that takes a lot more from Ireland than it does from English Freemasonry. But until the day he died, Gould could never be convinced that it was not a schism. And this led to, again, much discussion published in, much debate published in AQC. And I think that's important and valid discussing.
many other Masonic authors through the years. L.A. Howe in the 60s and 70s, Harry Carr, who died in the 90s, I think. Newt and Jones, who have several books that are still being published today. Eric Ward, Jacob Taft, others. So I completely lost myself here. This is interesting. So the first few issues, because we're talking about QCC, the correspondence circle, they had thousands of members by the turn of the century. So every issue, they would publish what they called the St. John's card. They did this very colorful bit of artwork. It was tapped into the book, excellent printing. They're really pretty pieces. And then following was a complete list of every member of the correspondence circle. And it's interesting seeing, so you read through the list in 19 teens, and DeWolf Smith, our Grand Secretary, is on the list. So there's a fascinating history there. For some reason, they stopped publishing it, but for many years, every year, they would have some interesting bit of artwork on the back of it, with interesting symbols for some of them. Yeah, I'm trying to keep so L.A. Howe wrote a seminal and still almost definitive work on what he calls, and this is in the late 60s, early 70s, he called fringe Freemasonry. And we're talking about Yarker, we're talking about Woodman and Wolcott and a few others who, to a certain degree, are responsible for the modern New Age movement, because they created various actual circles, if you want, but esoteric groups who were interested in studying spirituality and doing comparative religion. So they formed the Theosophical Society or the Ordo Templi Orientis, other groups like that. And it was considered until recently that they actually had quite an impact on Masonic thinking. But go back and review the documents. And no, it was a small group of people, most of them centered around south of England or London area. They published their own little books and they influenced the other groups, but they really had little or no impact on Freemasonry itself until the 1970s or 1980s, when we started getting some younger men coming in who had been introduced to Freemasonry because of their interest in, call it the occult or alternative ideas. So they assumed that somehow this group had been influential in Freemasonry, when in fact it had not. I don't know if it's influenced any issue in this room. Talked about Harry Carr. Harry Carr is a sweetheart, died some years ago. Copies of his book with his autograph on them doesn't make him any more value. He autographed just about every single copy of that book that came off the press. He published quite a number of books, had an extensive library, and when he died, did not donate them to the Grand Lodge of England Library, gave them to Texas, didn't he? Or the Scottish Rite in Texas. Yeah, there you go. I don't think I've seen a catalog of it, so I don't know. But that book is still in Freemason, still in public, still being published, and is an excellent work, actually. It is, of course, more oriented to English Freemasonry, so it will make more sense for someone in an emulation work or Canadian work than for the ancient work. But in terms of our history and where a lot of our symbols come from, an excellent work. John Hamill has been here once, twice, just the once. Okay. He was the librarian for the Grand Lodge of England at one time. He published their 250th anniversary book, which we have a couple of copies in our library. And he left his job as librarian to head up basically their PR department in England when they had a major dust up with the press and the government that were trying to get laws passed that would require every Freemason, anyone involved in the police or the judiciary, to have to declare they were a Freemason. They were fighting that. A couple of interesting things came out of that. One, we realized, or UGLE, Brown Lodge of England, recognized a lot of these, or a number of these judges and lawyers and police officers were women who belonged to the women Freemasons. So the women Freemasons had the same issue that we had. So maybe we should, we're not going to recognize them, but we have to acknowledge they exist on a legal level. And so now there is, you know, a conversation going on between the two groups. But what actually won the day for England had nothing to do with the English legal system, but they had joined the European Common Market, or the European Union, and European law said that you could not discriminate like this, whereas English law said you could. So actually, now that they've left the EU, someone might decide to bring back that rule that Freemasons have to declare their membership. Hopefully not. He also wrote History of English Freemasonry. That one's still published, and another book that you might consider adding to your library. Who else have we got? Bob Cooper used to be the I got to change my slide. He's no longer the curator of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. Bob Cooper is a member of Quatuor Coronati. He wrote the Rosslyn hoax. He thoroughly debunks the idea. It's a very tedious read. It's very, very, very documented point by point. And he makes it a solid case that no, the Knights Templar were never near Rosslyn Chapel, and no, Sinclair was not Templar. Unfortunately, Rosslyn Chapel, because of course it's interested in getting tourists to flock to the place, now promote the idea of a connection with Freemasonry and with the Knights Templar. I mean, it's worth visiting. It's a fascinating historical artifact, but it has nothing to do with Freemasonry or the Knights Templar. So he wasn't terribly popular within certain group of people in Scotland. Bob Cooper is also responsible for the fact that today, if you're doing genealogical research, which you thoroughly enjoy, that you're familiar with Ancestry.com, brilliant website. England gave them access to all of their records from, well, they didn't have records back in 1717, but whatever their earliest records are, up until 70 years is the Privacy Act in England. So everything back until 1954, I guess. But, our Ancestry.com has these amazing Skookum scanning software where they were able to OCR handwriting, you know, and not all the penmanship back then was as good as you think it is. But it's online if you have an account, and you can search members. Ireland has done something the same, but Scotland, because Bob Cooper, has never computerized their record keeping. If you can't tell them, well, your grandfather's, the lodge that he belonged to, and roughly when he may have belonged, they won't even bother looking for it, because they thought it's a physical dig through a card catalog or ledgers. I've never seen it. I'm not. Bob Cooper was just opposed to all of that, and although he retired 2-3 years ago, he's still. Nice fan though. And some of you may know S. Brent Morris, past master of Quatuor Coronati Lodge. He's the reason I'm a member of Quatuor Coronati Lodge. And Jonathan Broadbery here is the reason that I met Brent Morris, because there was a conference where? Here? Vernon. Back in, I'm going to say 2005 or something. Six. Something else you should know about me. When I'm standing in front of you like this talking, do not quote me on a single date that I ever did. If I write it down, if I publish a paper, oh boy, it'll be documented. When I'm standing up here rambling on, I'm just making it up. I can't think for it. So 2006, in Vernon, there was a Scottish Rite something get together, and Brent Morris came up from Virginia. Brent Morris, at the time, was the so first of all, he was editor of Herod, which is the Scottish Rite Research Journal. He was, I'm not sure if he was curator of their library or what his role was. Nevertheless, information officer, something like that. Broadbery says, "Oh, you've got to meet Brent." And I said, "I'm not Scottish Rite, but that's fine. You know, you don't come into the session, but we'll go for the dinner and what have you." And I sat with Brent, and he and I had a rambling, great chat. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from him, or an email, who knows, saying he wants me to write a paper for QC, and he wants me to write a preliminary history of Freemasonry on the internet. It's not a topic I was that interested in, but I ended up writing something that runs about 70 pages in one of the issues of QC. And Brent, bless his heart, actually created the index for it. He thought it was important enough to do that. And then a few years later, he sponsored me for membership. So Brent is, of course, as I say, editor of Herod. He's written much more on the Scottish Rite, I suspect, than he has on Freemasonry, or on craft Freemasonry, I'm not sure. What else? Yeah, author of over a dozen books on Freemasonry, and he's a magician. Or more to the point, a prestidigitator. And if you ever had the opportunity to hear him speak, he's very entertaining. He can talk on masonry, he can talk on any number of things. He got his doctorate, his PhD in card playing, being card sharp, magic tricks. So probabilities. And had an extensive career with the NSA in the States, which he will not talk about. But it's all about, you know, probability, statistical analysis, data mining, and who knows what all else. Most of it pretty computer. Fascinating man, very entertaining speaker, unlike present company. I'll do the best I can. What's this book? Freemasonry for Dummies. Oh, Brent Morris wrote Freemasonry for Dummies. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry. That was published, I think, a year after or about the same time that Chris Hodak published Freemasonry for Dummies. This book, sorry, this is why. This book uses a number of images and quite a lot of quotes from our blog website, so he was familiar with our website, which is why he knew about me and why the rest of that happened, I guess. Book's still in print. Again, you know, focus more on an American audience, so not exactly the way we do things, but still a good general introduction. So current members, Bob Cooper is still a member, Brent Morris is still a member. He came over to our last meeting, and quite frankly, he's not doing too well. He's getting a little long in the tooth. He may not come again. Bad. Art DeHoyos, again with the Scottish Rite in Washington, D.C., is a member of the lodge. Mark Tabert, who was director of collections for the Masonic National Library in Virginia. Alexander, where is that?
Virginia.
I don't know when last time we actually saw him at a meeting. And Adam Kendall, who was curator of the collections for Grand Lodge in California. Not sure if he's still doing that. And let's see, I believe he's going to be next year my junior warden, but I'll check on that.
Kent Henderson.
Kent is a member. Yes, Kent Henderson. I don't mention him. Kent Henderson is interesting because I was quoting him in my inaugural address. Kent Henderson comes out of Australia or New Zealand? Australia. He's Australian. And he came through here at least once back in the 90s. And he was one of the first to raise a fuss about the fact that we were ignoring the fact that our membership was plummeting. And he did an extensive comparative statistical analysis of a whole bunch of Australian and North American jurisdictions, and pointed out that a lot of what we consider to be reasons for the decline or ways that we would kind of dismiss the problem. Oh, it's cyclical, or or it's bottoming out. Things that we were saying in the 80s, which is no. So and he traveled around talking about that a lot and talking about ways that lodges could change the way they do things, and a lot of what we have done in our lodges today in terms of trying to streamline business meetings, to engage newer members sooner, what have you. So so yes, Anderson was doing a lot of work. I don't think he comes over. I've seen him recently. So so we'll wrap this up with, like I say, for whatever reason, I was invited to become a member. My researches over the last several years have focused mostly on cemetery, and it was very strange. Richard invites me to come to Penticton, and the first thing I do is I go to my records, my files, and say, have I surveyed the cemetery in Penticton? I've been surveying cemeteries in BC for over a quarter of a century. I've never done the two cemeteries in Penticton. I have no idea I missed that. So that's where I was yesterday, and I got a whole bunch of pictures. There's some interesting markers up there. There's a fellow named Greer, got a big monument in the old cemetery. Don't know, was he a past master?
Not a past master.
I can't remember what the first name was.
Greer.
But there he has a big monument
lawyer.
right in the middle of it.
A lawyer.
I think he was a lawyer.
That's why he has a big monument. All right, so I start by doing our cemetery just because I want to keep a record. I'm not just photographing Mason's markers because I don't necessarily know that they were Mason. What I'm doing is trying to create a database, if you will, of Masonic emblems on cemeteries, on markers, and comparing them to markers for other fraternities. So as an example, in Vernon, there's a lot of Knights of Pythia families. There's two of them in your cemetery, and your old cemetery. Don't think there's very many at all in Vancouver. But the Masonic emblem overwhelmed statistically any other body. And then there were a lot of other organizations during 100 years ago, 110 years ago, before the First World War. There were more Oddfellows in British Columbia than there were Freemasons. But where we saw this huge spike in members during and after the First and Second World Wars, the Oddfellows just dropped right off. They currently have 12 lodges in all of the province, I believe. How many members that might include, I don't know. Knights of Pythias, I don't know if they have any lodges in this jurisdiction at this point. There is one interesting one here, Woodmen of the World, which was another fraternal organization. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, what was called the golden age of fraternalism in North America, there were hundreds, literally several hundred fraternal orders. Many of them never got outside of the town or the state or the region. Ones that still exist, such as, the Buffaloes come out of England. But ones like the Elks, the Lions, the Eagles, they mostly were insurance plans, burial societies, a reason to be able to get a liquor license to have a private club, that sort of thing. And because a lot of white middle-class men at that time wanted to join something, would join a dozen of these different organizations in their neighborhood. But over time, they all disappeared. We're the only one really that continues to be that healthy. They say the Oddfellows were hanging on by their fingernails. The Buffalo in England still aren't doing too bad. There'll be a few others. So This is a cemetery, I'm not sure which one. There are 7 major cemeteries in London. Since I'm going over to London to attend Quatuor Coronati meetings, and I've never been a tourist, you know, I'm not going to the palace, I'm not going to wherever. I'm doing whatever my own research. I spend a lot of time in archives and museums, but I've also surveyed all 7 of the major cemeteries in London to do a comparison. And I'm eventually going to be writing a paper for Q.C. on comparing the use of Masonic emblems by Masons in their death rites, as it were, in the heart of the British Empire, London, and compare and contrast with the fringe of the British Empire, British Columbia. There's over 400, a little over 400 cemeteries in British Columbia, and I think I've done about 170 of them at this point, which will give me more than enough for some sort of statistical analysis, and I'm getting tired. But there certainly is some fascinating one in England with what's this one? Not sure who that is. Oh, except what's also interesting in England, though. So, you know, faith, hope, and charity. In England, what I've discovered is that it's not the famous Freemasons. Letchworth was Grand Secretary of UGLE for many years. You know, one of those Grand Secretaries that really left an imprint on Freemasonry. And in fact, and also owned the major regalia supply store, which still has an office in Great Queen Street, but there's absolutely nothing on there that says that he was a Mason. Whereas there's 3 distinct groups in England that will put the Masonic emblem on their grave marker. It's people in the military, usually mostly naval, and people in the police. Again, mostly naval or port authority kind of ones, and people in the liquor trade, or as they were called at the time, victuals. Those are the 3 groups that mostly, which makes a certain amount of sense. 2 of those are people or groups that are used to wearing emblems. Remembering that England, as a rule, doesn't wear rings, don't wear lapel pins, certainly don't wear baseball caps. So, you know, they don't wear their Freemasonry on their sleeve, as it were. So to have them actually put a marker on their grave says something about their relationship with Freemasonry and their relationship with symbols and emblems. And of course, people in the liquor trade are just trying to promote it.
You were saying like the alcohol makers, right? That's interesting because have you ever seen Alexander Keith's grave in Halifax?
I've not seen the grave. I have a photograph of it in full.
Yeah, it's quite ostentatious. It's covered in Masonic, not just symbols, but messages.
Yeah.
He was Grand Master and he was
well, and that's North America. It's a very different attitude towards how we present ourselves to the public between England and North America. Although here we have this fellow here, it's not really sharp enough, but there's a big honking square and compass up there with a star in the middle of it. He was the founder of the Order of Secret Monitor. And so he's got, that thing must be another 1.5 foot higher than my hand. So that's 8 feet. So it's about a 10-foot high thing. And on a right up front in one of the oldest cemeteries, just up the hill from there is Karl Marx's marker. There's any connection there. So I think that pretty well wraps up anything I can tell you about Quatuor Coronati. Certainly visit our website. Back issues, our PDFs for the first 20 years, I think, are available for download on the website, maybe more, I'm not sure. Membership in the correspondence circle is available through there. If you're interested in seeing what future researches go on. And I think that's all I can tell you about that. Thank you very much. Well, if anyone's interested Remember, I was saying I'm doing researches in London. I have identified probably not that there aren't that many, every Masonic emblem found in the streets of London. There's a little brochure here. You're welcome to take one of those. I am also the secretary of the Vancouver Lodge of Educational Research. Please, someone take that from me.
No.
A few years ago, we published Oil for the Lamp. For $10, you get a copy of all the significant papers published in our 75-year history. That's available. Since you're handing out histories of lodges, if I may, I'd like to present you and your master with a copy of the 75 years of history of my mother lodge, King George Lodge, 127, now Centennial King George 171.
Thank you.
Quite welcome. There's one typo in that book. This is an old publisher's trick. You put one typo in a book, and that way you can find out if anyone ever steals your text. Something like this, I don't see anyone bothering to do that. It's just old habits. But that's my story anyway. So there we go. What time are we?
We're good. Just before lunch. Got some questions and
Yeah, I can answer questions. I can talk about anything else, or I can shut up. You know.
You had on the golden dawn.
Yes.
I got a book that's 4 inches thick, by Israel regarding.
Yes.
It's quite famous on it.
Yeah.
You never mentioned Manly Farmer Hall.
Well, he wasn't a member of Q.C., but no, certainly when you talk about esoteric there,
Yeah.
esoteric is certainly man in California.
He is on YouTube, and he did do something about hidden symbolism in plain sight.
Manly P. Hall has sort of a mixed record when it comes to Freemasonry. So he founded the Builders of the Idiom and published a number of books, many books, wrote constantly. I've talked occasionally with the librarian of their library in California somewhere, I'm not sure where it is. But he also published years before he joined Freemasonry, I think 4 years old or something, he published a book on Freemasonry that years later he completely repudiated and said, no, I didn't have a clue what I was writing about. But, and basically trying to connect us with a whole lot of ancient mystery schools because that was his interest. And the basic response to that sort of writing or those sort of opinions is to simply say, similarity doesn't mean causality.
Yeah.
Just because the Tongs in South China use the number 3 extensively, and we use the number 3 extensively, doesn't mean we're connected. And you know, or that the Egyptian priests wore an apron and we wear apron, doesn't mean anything. But Manly P. Hall went off that deep end. It's a rabbit hole you can go down.
Have you heard the name Timothy Hogan?
Timothy
Hogan.
Hogan, as in Hogan's Heroes. Timothy Hogan. No.
So he did something on the Knights Templars. He's on YouTube. And I just thought it was fascinating how he connects the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
And there was apparently 10 of them, not just one.
Well,
But
well, exactly. I mean, all of this speculation is interesting.
yeah.
Where I find it difficult, and this full disclosure, before I got involved in Freemasonry, and actually to this day to a certain degree, I am not particularly involved in esoteric occult circles, but my circle of friends and acquaintances include just about all of Vancouver is a hotbed of wingnuts. And a lot of those wingnuts are my friends. And that's the argument, discussion I have with them along is, you know, similarity is not causality. And just because you want something to be true doesn't mean it is. And numbers aren't as important as you think there are. Things just happen. I mean, you know, I'm something, I don't have a conspiracy view of history. I have a chaos theory of history. Things are just going to happen. Because
Okay, last thing, so Winston Churchill
yes,
belonged to the secret order of Druids.
Yes.
Is that anything to do with Masonry?
No, but again, we're talking about, so that was, now his name won't come to me. But the fellow who founded that, he tried to buy Stonehenge at one point because it was, well, it actually didn't become part of the National Trust till maybe after the First World War, until 30 years.
Yeah, I just read something before I left my house. Something about who stole Stonehenge. So maybe it was I didn't go into it. It's just a headline, but maybe that was a National Trust.
Well, yeah, so they own it now and they take care of it, but for the longest time, no one did. It was just in a field, and if you wanted to buy the field, and he tried to raise money. This is, we're talking about the 1840s. Cannot remember his name. But this is it. As I'm saying, Freemason, not Freemasonry, but Freemasons, and this is one of the biggest things I stress to non-Masons. It's Freemasonry and Freemasons is two entirely different things. A Freemason may be attracted to Freemasonry because of our history and esoteric will teachings, but already have their own ideas about esotericism. Those ideas are not Freemasonry's ideas. And a lot of the people that I named here, and Paul as an example you mentioned, are people who joined Freemasonry because they were attracted to it because of an aspect of it that appealed to them for their own interests. Yeah. But that level of interest has nothing to do with Freemasonry itself. So with Gardner as well, Gardner had nothing to do with, Gerald Gardner had nothing to do with Quatuor Coronati. He was a member of the lodge, and he pretty much is responsible for the modern Wicca. Woodford was the thing, you know, the Golden Dawn and the OTO, which are between Gardner and some of these guys. That's the modern New Age movement, pretty much, or the spiritual side of the New Age movement, but also vegetarianism and a whole lot of other things in that sort of counterculture, if you will. So Freemasonry or Freemasons have always had an impact, not always that visible, in our society. But I think conspiracy theorists, you cannot blame Freemasonry for what the individual Freemason gets up to.
I have a question. So in the beginning, you were talking about how we had some Masons think we have a connection with building the Temple of Solomon. Mm-hmm. Does that have a relationship with the Lesser Key of Solomon? We decided that we think that there's like, I don't know if we think that we think, but we think that it was built by demons. By the 72 demons of Solomon. Oh, the demon, yeah. So well, demonology and all of that has nothing to do with it. So what I try to point out is that Freemasonry really, I mean, I talked about the Regis manuscript, which is also called the Holywell poem, because Holywell was the guy who found it in 40. We try to pretend that we have a history going back to the 600s. When in fact we have a lineage of stealing ideas that goes back to 600 years. But really, I think to a certain degree, you can say that what we think of as being Freemasonry, being in a room, 3 degrees of initiation, certain symbols, only goes back to 1717. I mean, we didn't have a 3 degree. We had a 3rd degree before 1730, but not many lodges used it. You know, so there's been all that sort of evolution. So basically, so if we're actually a creation of the early 1700s, what were the men doing? What sort of people were at that time? Well, we're talking about early days of the Enlightenment. We're talking about the scientific revolution. We're talking about the liberal arts and sciences. We're talking about in our one of the degrees in Canadian work, which is the only one I'm really familiar with. We talk about finding happiness in the paths of science. You know, we are rationalists. We are humanists. We're not magicians. In terms of what they were trying to form, keeping in mind that as late as 1700 or later in the Western world, that line between magic and science, experimental magic and experimental science, that was still a pretty blurry line because we still were trying to figure things out. A lot of people believe that Solomon was the original magician.
Exactly, that he levitated the stones.
show me a document, show me a photograph. I want to see a photograph, you know. One of my favorite arguments about a lot of that, in the late 60s, I think, I don't think it was in the 70s, Swiss scientist named Eric von Däniken, published a book called Chariot of the Gods. So I use that as an example whenever I'm criticizing books of this nature, is von Däniken science. Von Däniken science is where in chapter 1, you say, well, you know, how did this happen? Here's how, maybe this is how this happened, you know, sort of positively a suggestion of something. And somehow on chapter 2, you build on that a little bit, and by chapter 3, you're quoting it as a fact. You can just bootstrap yourself right up to that. And that's an awful lot of the books that have been conspiratorial books written about Masonry, bootstrapping their idea without any real. I love the ones, there's a fellow named Ravenscroft, that's right? It may be Ravenscroft, who don't know if he's published anything recently. Back in the 90s, published a whole lot of books, kind of conspiratorial relating to Freemasonry, but also a lot of really specious history. But he had a tendency, he would extensively footnote, but if you actually check the footnotes, he was quoting earlier books he'd written. His own work. They were. So yeah. So I have a lot of time for what I refer to as my wingnets, because I find them interesting and engaging, but I'm not necessarily going to believe anything. And I'm not going to push back terribly hard, because if they want to believe that, that's fine. But I want to make, I'm going to be very clear about my own beliefs, and I got to be able to, you know, do not try and tell me your opinion is the table's here. I can tell you the table is there, you know. But that's just me.
But the internet said it's over here.
But the internet said it's over there.
The book, The Hiram Key by Nathan Lomas. What's your opinion on that? I'm about halfway.
Speaking of von Däniken science.
Yeah, okay.
So the problem with Knight and Lomas is they spent some time with.
They're Masons, right?
They're both Masons. They're both neither are academics, but both of them are intelligent, educated men. But neither of them are actually historians, and that is a specialized field. Academically, you know, I pretend, but no. I spent 30-odd years as a graphic designer, a publication designer. So that doesn't really qualify me any more than any of the rest of you here to talk about our history. I have to really watch what I say in Quatuor Coronati Lodge, because as I say, I'm surrounded by, the secretary of the lodge is currently the dean of architectural history in Cambridge. Am I going to talk about history of architecture? No. You know, the head of the editorial committee is a retired professor of classics. I'm very careful whenever I say any use any Latin quote. Got to watch your pronunciation of Latin. And I think they're very forgiving. They sort of, oh yeah, it's just that Canadian going up so high. What was the question again?
Oh, it was Knight and Lomas.
Oh, Knight and Lomas. I think Knight and Lomas published a bunch of books, and they also was someone named Bayesian. Now, Bayesian was really big on connecting us with a whole lot of bizarre ideas without any real foundation in von Däniken science. He has modified a lot of his views in more recent years, I'd like to believe. Yeah, both of them write popular history. They're not
The Dan Brown type of.
Well, exactly. It was interesting when Dan Brown published, what's the one that was about Freemasonry? The lost symbol, the lost symbol.
Yeah.
And Freemasonry really liked that book. And many of you may have copies of that. There are some jurisdictions in the states that bought them wholesale and gave them to their members, used it as you know, membership drive kind of use. And as soon as I read it, I wrote a book review for Quatuor Coronati, trashing it. by saying, yes, he has Langford as the protagonist, Langford. He has him saying nice things about Freemasonry throughout it. But the underlying story arc is about a secret cabal within Freemasonry that has the power and the willingness to kill people to hide their secret. That's not really what we want our message to be. So I wrote this a review, simply trashing it. Got an email back the next day from the editorial board saying, oh, well, we can't publish that. And then the day after that, I got another email back saying we passed it on to a few other people and yes, we're publishing it. So QC's official position on Dan Brown is nice fiction, stress the fiction. From top to bottom. So, you know, although quite frankly, I don't even think he's a particularly good writer of fiction. Or certainly, there was the Edinburgh Review or something, I think it was a newspaper reviewer in Scotland, wrote a review of Dan Brown, titling it 20 reasons why Dan Brown is a bad author, or something like that. And just using little quotes and saying, you know, the grammar in this or the way this is written is just horrible.
Did a good screenplay.
Sorry?
Made a good screen.
Good screenplay. But
did I see the movie? No, I don't think so. Yeah.
I was thinking of a movie that had the character of Sir Charles Warren in it back in around 2000.
Something Hell.
From Hell. And it was Ian Richardson played Sir Charles Warren.
Yeah.
And they had like this cabal that could kill people.
And Dr. Dull was not a Freemason.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah,
so for those of you who have not seen it, it's a fun movie. That's Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, I mean it's a great movie. Johnny Depp was watching it
by Moore. What's his name?
Michael? No, Roger. No.
Oh boy. He's a wingnut, long hair. Bruce worked with DC Comics.
Yeah, no, isn't that Michael?
No.
No, Michael Moore is the activist. I know who you mean. Yeah, because it was originally a comic book. Sorry, not a comic book.
Comic. It was a comic book.
Graphic novel. Not a comic book. What do you call that?
Graphic novel.
Graphic novel. Oh.
He's the same one that did like Watchmen and anytime you see anything he's done, he's got like Mason symbols all through.
Oh yeah.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so on our Grand Lodge website, I don't know if you've seen them or not, but there's an extensive. I think I'm up to about 110, 112 movies that I found that have Masonic references.
See Parnassus?
Sorry?
Imagine with Dr. Parnassus, Christopher Plummer, Tom Waits, Johnny Depp. Heath Ledger, you got it. You should watch it. I can lend you a copy.
I have to check. I may have. I'll make. Well, I make a note.
Very good.
Because I have a memory like this.
Entertaining. The Imaginary of Dr. Parnassus.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. I just heard pronunciation. Yes, the Imaginarium. Yes, and there are 3 chapters on the website. So I got that. Yeah. No, I think and there's a paper I'm going to write at some point. It's an analysis, not just saying these are the movies, but here's a story or the first film about Freemasons. The earliest movies, the earliest films were, and I can't remember what the proper name for them were, but they were 20 or 40-second shorts. We're talking about 1890s. Street scene. So you would just take your camera that was bigger than this thing, stick it on the street, turn it on for 20 seconds, and people were just walking by or whatever. And then you work on a farm in Duluth, and you're back up beyond wherever in a small town, you go to your local OS house, and they'll put up a screen and they'll show you little 20-second shorts of street scenes in big cities that you've never seen before. So that's very exciting. I mean, they're moving, so that's even more exciting. The first Masonic one is a Knights Templar parade, 20-minute New York short of a Knights Templar. So that, of course, is a documentary based. The first fictional one was a movie version of a stage play called Are You a Mason, in which father and his son-in-law for some reason, I mean, this is a sort of a comedy of misunderstandings, have both told the other that they're Freemasons when in fact they're not. And then hilarity ensues, you know, whatever. And then right up to most recently, what was the last one that I found? There's been some in the last few years, but there's an interesting change in how Freemasonry turns up in movies. We're either being represented as being kind of secretive and mysterious and occult. We're talking about the 20s and the 30s, 40s. Then we become very mainstream, and it's the city mayor, the police chief, figures of authority, figures of respect. You know, the father figure in the movie, whatever, would be wearing a ring or a square. That'll be it. And then by the time the king and I, or sorry, what was the man who would be king, is probably about the tipping point, because of course they're a nasty bit of work, those two. Yeah. Really. So it was after that we started being portrayed in either a more conspiratorial or negative fashion. There was faint hope, and I thought, just a couple of years ago, there's a British television show called Vienna Blood. Vienna Blood is an excellent, and some of you are nodding, is an excellent, as far as I'm concerned, production values, the acting, a lot of fun. It's about a psychiatrist in the early days of psychiatry in Vienna, so we're talking about 1906 or something, which is to say, he says, I'm a psychiatrist, and they say, what's that? You know, you have to explain what he does. They don't believe it, but he somehow befriends or is befriended by a police inspector, and the two of them solve crimes, you know. So it's the interplay between the two of them and all that, but it's based on a series of books, and the first book, Vienna Blood, basically, it's all Masonic. Yet when they turned it, the first two seasons of the TV show, and the third one is about to come out, I think. The first two seasons, they used the murders that were in the book, but they stripped it of every Masonic effect at all. They figured, okay, Masonry is not an important part of the story. And it isn't really in the book, it's a red herring, which is often the case in these things. You know, British police procedurals will have a murder take place in or outside or around the lodge hall, when in fact, by the end of the story, it has absolutely nothing to do with Freemasonry. But the British press and the British media really like going after Freemasonry, because Freemasonry doesn't fight back for an easy target.
Jack the Ripper.
And Jack the Ripper one. Yeah, so that whole Jack the Ripper story, nobody, when was Jack the Ripper? 97? No, earlier. Yeah, in the 80s. 1880s, whenever it was. Maybe later, 1890s. Anyway, no one at that time ever suspected or suggested that it had anything to do with Masonry. There was, you know, even the yellow press, all the penny rebels, nothing was ever said.
They thought they were acting like it was the Jews.
Well, exactly, which was really bizarre, because the graffiti that was painted on the wall, English, well, actually, which was later claimed to be a Masonic password, but English Freemasonry doesn't use those. It's American Freemasonry. But the whole idea of this started in the late 60s, I think, and I can't remember who the book writer was, and he came up with the royal theory. He tied it to the royal family, and a artist named, oh well, but this was an artist who, or the son of an artist at the time, who later, years after the original book was published, in a radio interview or a TV interview, said, "Oh, I just made it all up." But of course, the books continue. There's I can't remember what. So many things I can't remember. There's a name for this condition, or this syndrome, if you will.
Lactution logic.
Well, no, this is something else. But that's another one. Where a lie, refuting a lie, gives the original lie more press, more publicity, and that someone who isn't directly involved who will hear your rebuttal or read your rebuttal of the lie, will often in the future only remember the lie.
They call that the big lie.
Sorry?
In like philosophy or whatever, they call it the big lie.
Okay, there's another term for, there's a Latin term for it, but it doesn't matter. But the point is that by us going out and saying, well, no, we didn't kill a whole bunch of prostitutes in Whitechapel, or no, we didn't kill Kennedy. The only thing people will remember is, oh, I remember something about them killing Kennedy, you know. So we lose either way if we argue, you know, if we try to refute some of the lies. We sometimes just perpetuate it to people who would not have heard it originally. Want to talk about something else?
Well, I'm sure we'll have time for that. The biggest takeaway I was hoping for, and I think was achieved, is my interest in the Q.C. goes back many years. I wanted Trevor to come talk about it because I hear brothers talk about things that's very meaningful, and they'll make attachments to ties Freemasonry and history. And I just wanted to have you in to talk about the difference between what you refer to as historical references, and then you mentioned legend and myth. And it's very important that, well, I have found more on the historical side fascinating than actually the legend and myth, when I start to learn the real background to Freemasonry. But Trevor, what I'd like to do right now, I hope that you can stick around for our lunch.
Oh, yeah. No,
but
we're not going anywhere.
Before we go to lunch, very pleased to have Right Worshipful Brother John Broadbery with us. And Trevor brought him, so that should tell you something. But many of us know John. Many of you don't know John, and you're just new. John, I'd like to have you just say like a few words about what we're trying to do here, what's been presented, and just give them some idea of what you're about.
Well, I've been involved in Freemasonry and Canvas since 1982. And when I look back over our recent history in Canvas, it's been an exciting ride. And we've had a good deal to do with District 10 in various ways over quite a number of years. Come down to here, and as soon as I believe, and just presented various ideas and various things that we've been up to. We're fortunate, Kamloops, that we have resources that enable us to execute the design, as the quote on the screen a few minutes ago said. The heart may conceive and the brain may devise in vain if the hand is not prompt to execute the design. That's, I think, what it said. Okay. And that's all very true. I'm interested in conceiving and imagining things and presenting ideas and what have you, but I'm rubbish at executing and actually doing it. So, and getting other people. But that's me. We've been lucky in Canvas that we've had the resources to do Freemasonry in various ways. And we've had people like Jack Harper, for example, who was very influential in Kamloops, and then through the jurisdiction when he's Grand Master. So all of that being said, where are we in Freemasonry in Canada? Well, we're in the same position as you all are, really. Canada's 100,000 people, and we now have 160 Freemasons and craft Freemasons. Our peak in 1962 was something in the order of, I want to say 350 or 400, 250 in number 10, and also 100. We're now about 80 apiece. We get caught up in the idea of measuring value, both to individuals and to the organization, in terms of numbers or quantities or things that people can say, oh, well, it's 250 in 1962 or something, which has nothing to do with the value of Freemasonry